If we could start working our way towards our seats, I'm gonna get started here in a minute. All right. Good morning. Got my gavel for the my last meeting. Welcome to this Metro Planner Orlando TAC meeting. I'd like to call the meeting to order. I am Chairman Joshua DeVries, and I'll be chairing the meeting today. You could please silence all cell phones, laptops, and other electronic noisemakers. If you need to make a call, please step out to the hallway or cafe area to do so. And just as a reminder, this meeting and our future meetings will be in person. It's important for all TAC members to attend our meetings in person in order for us to have a quorum. Members of the public will still be able to participate virtually, and we encourage them to do that. Moving on to chairman announcements. There are two public comment points in the meeting. Members of the public attending in person who want to speak need to fill out a comment card and give it to Rachel. And those attending virtually who want to speak will use the raise hands feature in the Zoom screen. If attending by phone, you can hit *9 to raise your hand and request to be recognized. When you're called, your microphone will be temporarily unmuted by staff and will ask you to state your name and contact information for the record. We also accepted comments by email before the meeting. And now I'll turn it over to Slade for agenda review.
All right, thank you. Good morning again. Welcome to TAC. Two minor changes to the agenda today. Item 6C, the Best Foot Forward Annual Report, will be presented by Vince Dyer. Also, there will be a change to action item 8B, the TIP amendments. Jason Sartorio will be able to tell you a bit more about that during his presentation on the action item. Also, there is a packet at each of your seats today. The packet is supplementary information for today's 2050 MTP status update, which includes two items. The first is a short summary of the feedback that our 2050 MTP team received on the draft prioritization methodology. And the second is an updated draft updated draft prioritization methodology. It's in a technical memo format, and Taylor will get into that a bit more during her presentation on the 2050 MTP and the readout of the technical workshop. And we'll be discussing that a bit more at the next MTP technical workshop, which is via Zoom next Thursday on December 12th. So a couple of other announcements. The Safe Routes to School program from FDOT is currently open for application. So FDOT will be accepting those applications until the January 31st, deadline. Also, some very advanced notice. The 2025 ITE annual meeting will be hosted in Orlando on August 10th through 13th, 2025. If you're thinking of attending or having some of your staff attend, you may want to start thinking on that, especially since it is in town this year. Also, one last housekeeping item. Just be advised, Metro Plan Orlando offices will be closed on Christmas and New Year's Day. With that, I can turn it over for our safety moment. Thanks.
Good morning, everyone. I'm role playing as Mike this morning. He is off doing other safety things, actually. He's doing some training for our Orange County demonstration, SS4A demonstration, where we'll be doing a bicycle safety training program for middle schoolers. So we're excited about that one. But what I'm going to present on today is our safety moment. And this week here in Florida and nationally, it's Older Driver Safety Awareness Week. And Mike pulled some statistics for us I'm going to share with you. We're seeing about 48 fatal crashes per year involving drivers 65 and over. That's not necessarily saying that those 48 fatalities were people that were 65 and over, just that they were involved in the crash. Mike did pull some additional stats looking at crash rates for our elderly drivers versus those under 65. And we see that for both sort of total crash rate and for that crash rate at night, that elderly drivers had sort of a lower crash rate. And Mike pointed out that, first of all, he'll be joining this cohort next year, and that our elderly drivers, tend to have more experience and to know themselves a little bit better. That may be contributing to why those rates are a little bit less than our other age cohorts. We know that there are quite a few elderly drivers here in the state of Florida, and FDOT actually has a safety coalition that focuses specifically on driver safety for those in that age cohort that I encourage you to go and visit. They have a lot of resources, not just about safety actually, but also access and being able to age in place. So I encourage you to check out safemobilityfl.com. And we usually have been coming to you with a Vision Zero update. We won't have a formal presentation today, but I had some news that I wanted to share with you. Many of you may have heard that Metro Plan Orlando was awarded a little over $2 million a couple of weeks ago to continue our efforts now that we have an adopted regional plan with quite a lengthy list of actions that we'll be pursuing over the next several years. And so these funds will help us and some of our local partners to be able to advance the actions within that plan, do some additional outreach, some road safety audits, and some plan consolidation. So we're excited to jump into that. And you'll be hearing several updates as we go along with that work. We were not the only ones in the region that were successful, I'm happy to say. Orange County was also a direct recipient. The Sanford Airport Authority was also a direct recipient. They'll be doing an airport specific action plan. And then UCF, that is housed within our region, also won some funding to do some safety work, actually we're just outside of the region in Lake and Sumter County. And then our colleagues at the city of Castleberry were also successful in their bid for some additional funding. So we'll stay tuned for that work coming through. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. All right, thank you.
And thank you, Laura. Had one more announcement that I forgot to mention earlier. The APA Orlando Metro section had their Christmas party and first ever awards ceremony last night, and very happy to report that Metro Plan Orlando won Project of the Year for the Vision Zero regional plan. So wanted to give a shout out to the planning team for that, but also I think just about everyone sitting at this table helped with that plan as well. So thank you / congratulations to all of you as well for all of your help. All right, and now I will turn it back to you, Mr. Chair.
It's great news. Thank you for sharing that, Slade, and Laura. Thank you for the safety moment. Next, we have item 4, agency reports. This is an opportunity for any of our partner agencies to speak to the committee. If any of our partners wish to provide updates during this slot, please let Rachel and Slade know via email at least 2 weeks prior to the TAC meeting. Today, we have Amy Beckman for our regular report out from FDOT.
Good morning, Chair and committee members. It's nice to see everyone. Welcome to non-hurricane season. Happy to report no last minute changes to my schedule because of that. So that's good. I wanted to give you a little bit of an update concerning Hurricane Milton. FDOT District 5 did have our largest debris pickup we've really ever had to deal with Hurricane Milton. And unfortunately, a lot of our contractors were out in districts 1 and 2. So a lot of our debris pickup was coordinated in-house, and like individuals in the district office even went out and helped to do that. I did some flagging. I was out on the roads. You're welcome. And I'm sorry. No, but no, we did pick up over 35,000 cubic yards of debris. And so it is has set the standard. So we will hopefully continue to do so in a quick and efficient manner to get everybody out there safely. The biggest thing I want to point out to you today is that our tentative 5-year work program did open up on December 2nd. Public comments to be part of the public record are due by December 20th. Our work program department will be here in January, February to kind of go over the changes and anything that happened in our work program and explain and answer questions in January and February. But we wanted to make sure we pointed this out. So we both have the website and a QR code. If you'd like to scan it to go, it will take you directly to our website where you can see the virtual hearing is going on this week. And you can also at the bottom of that page then fill out any commentary you have to become part of the public record at the bottom of that website. So I encourage you to take part in it, look and go forward from there. Additionally, the Florida FTP, or our Florida Transportation Plan, is still going on. Our subcommittees are still meeting. I believe there's a round of meetings coming up in January. You can look at those at floridaftp.com. Just like you guys here at Metro Plan are doing your MTP, we are doing our FTP, and it's a great chance for you to get in and make your commentary towards the future of our transportation system. One last thing I wanted to point out actually is that we will be at FDOT helping to participate in Jordan's Sporting Goods Store on December 14th. That is a Saturday. It's going to be at 1965 South Orange Blossom Trail in Apopka. What it is it's a foundation for a little boy who passed away. His family collects used and new sporting goods and bike helmets and things like that. So our safety office and FDOT will be there helping to participate. It's from 7:30 to 5, again on Saturday the 14th. So if you are aware of any children or even possibly adults that need any bike helmets or any sporting goods, we would urge you to attend. And with that, I have completed my report. If you have any questions, I'm happy to hear them now or after. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Amy. Christina.
I just have a comment, Amy, on the tentative 5-year work program. The
Yes.
DOT has a GIS interactive sort of map of all the projects, and I just want to thank you all for having that, sharing that. I don't know if it's a tool that a lot of people use or know about, but it's a very efficient way to kind of dip in there and see, where the projects are, and it's got, flagged by, if it's a resurfacing or added lane. So I just want to thank you all for having that tool and keeping up with that.
Thank you very much. I will take that. I personally do not have anything to do with that. That's way too techy for me. I look at it though as well. But I will definitely pass that on. And I do encourage, anytime you guys have any tidbits or anything that you think would be helpful for us to get the information and convey it to you guys, please let us know. We are always looking to try and help get that information out and partner with everyone. So thank you.
Any other questions? All right, seeing none. Thank you, Amy, for the presentation. And Rachel will now do roll call.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Barden,
Here.
Henry for Brock,
Here.
Lopez for Carson,
Here.
Cash, Casolero, Castro,
Here.
Cologne,
Here.
Coulon,
Present.
Crandell,
Here.
Delachey,
Present.
DeVries,
Here.
Elliot Moore, Falk,
Here.
Hamza, Hardwick,
Here.
Hassan,
Here.
Krug, Moore for Lim,
Here.
Mendenhall, Perez for Nelson, Perez. Thank you. O'Keefe,
Here.
Parker, Price,
Present.
Pullum, Moffat for Ramos,
Here.
Recky,
Here.
Tefelsky for Roll, Sanchez,
Here.
Sanders,
Here.
Senerans,
Here.
Smith,
Present.
Story,
Here.
Wharton,
Here.
Martello for Williams,
Here.
Yeargain,
Here.
Yeager.
Present.
Mr. Chairman, that concludes the roll call. We do have a quorum.
Thank you, Rachel. We have, moving on to item 6, TAC and TISMO comment presentations. We have 4 of those comment presentations, which we'll hear now. If you could please stand your nameplate on end to signal that you wish to speak or ask a question, and we'll recognize you at the end. When speaking, please press the red button on the screen to turn on your microphone. First, we have Taylor Laurent with Metro Plan Orlando for an update on the 2050 MTP.
Good morning. So this is again, a routine update on our upcoming 2050 Metropolitan Transportation Plan that we're working on to adopt in December of 2025. So this meeting next calendar year, and the status that we've done and the progress we've made over the past month, or since your last meeting, a little over a month now. So in terms of our overall engagement with the public, that has continued since your last meeting. We've had 4 additional events, one being at the ASHI event just last night. So those engagement reports are being developed and will be included in your next agenda packet. So you can look at the feedback that we're receiving, and if it's relevant to your agency, be able to incorporate that and benefit from it as well. We are continuing our coordination efforts with the Central Florida Regional Planning Model team on the socioeconomic data. There's some additional coordination that we're still doing on the base year information for housing, population, and employment data. So while we work to get that right, that's going to continue to linger on the status update for a little while. In terms of our technical reports, there are several of them that are coming into the final recommendations and strategies stage. That includes our health, housing, environmental stewardship, resilience, financial resources, and congestion management process. So a lot of the work that we've been doing throughout this calendar year is coming to an end and close here, so we can use that information, as we have been throughout the past several months, to assist with our needs assessment and the project development, but also to inform the infrastructure investment decision-making tasks that we're going to begin in 2025, and more to come on that in a moment. But in terms of our needs assessment, we have completed all of the modal evaluations, which are shown on the right-hand side of the screen. And we've coordinated with each of you and your teams and the Department of Transportation to complete this process. That's involved 3 meetings with each of our different agencies, with each of you, totaling about 90 individual one-on-one conversations as we've been doing this. So thank you. That has been a lot of time investment from all of your teams as well. And we know that this is really helping to capitalize and improve our 2050 Metropolitan Transportation Plan projects that we're going to move forward with for the next 25 years. So thank you. And to brag, if you weren't part of those conversations, I think you all were though. We started with the state highway system review to kind of get our feet wet, look at the network in terms of different pieces, so it wasn't the state of Delaware all at once. Our second stage was the off-system needs review, so everything off of the state highway system, but still eligible for Metro Plan Orlando funding. And we just completed the final needs list review. So taking both of those 2 pieces, all of the comments and feedback was integrated, and then reviewing that list one last time for a final polish. So everyone has submitted their feedback and comments on that section, and we're in the process of finalizing and implementing those changes right now. So we can complete the needs assessment and have that full transportation to-do list in early 2025. So in terms of the next step, we have our prioritization process, which is what we'll use to prioritize that big to-do list that we've worked so hard to develop over the past 6 months. So this is where I'm going to deviate a little bit from the slides and refer to the packet that everyone has in front of them right now. So thank you to everyone who participated in the October MTP technical workshop where we began talking about prioritization, and the detailed working session we had on October 25th. We've taken all of the feedback and comments that you provided on the prioritization methodology and basically re-scrubbed and have a new version for you to be able to look over. And that's in your packet here. So the first page summarizes some of the key themes and common themes of information that we heard. And then beginning on that very next page is an updated technical memorandum that outlines the entirety of the prioritization process, from why it's important to how the math works, what those evaluation criteria are, and what those scoring metrics would look like. So if you have any questions, you can look through that at your leisure. I'm going to briefly highlight some of the key themes here in my presentation today, but we're going to be talking about this prioritization process and its updates in depth at our technical workshop next Thursday. So if you have any comments or questions today or over the next week, please email them to us, reach out to us in some way, shape, or form so we can address those or incorporate them into the presentation next Thursday so everyone can benefit from that knowledge. But overall, some of the process that we're using from 2045 to 2050 is going to remain fairly similar. We're keeping those same 5 goal areas. The biggest change that you're going to see between the last draft and this one is that the evaluation criteria have been simplified even further to 15 total, 3 per goal area. We heard a lot of comments about how we needed to balance those a little bit better across all of our goal areas, and that's what you'll see in this latest version. Already talked about weighting at prior meetings. The weighting was developed through the survey that was results that we received for the technical workshop recipients or participants earlier this year. So that's where that initial draft weighting came from. We didn't receive too many comments on that, so that has remained the same for this updated draft. Mentioned those evaluation criteria have been simplified down to 3 per goal area, with the full methodologies and descriptions of what these are, how they're measured, included in the memo for your review. The ranges and scoring metrics have also been updated and are detailed in the technical memo that you can review either after this meeting or ask us questions after today. The other kind of larger change that you're going to see is the criteria applicability to the different modal programs. At our last draft, we had 9 modal programs. Here it's been simplified down to 7. As we incorporated the feedback that we received about which evaluation criteria were applicable to which modes, we saw that, at least for TISMO, the 2 options that we had were exactly the same. So we don't need 2 categories. So that was simplified down to 1. Same with active transportation and trails. Those came out to be exactly the same, and there was some confusion about the difference between those. So to eliminate that entirely, those have been combined into a single active transportation category. So all of that's explained in detail in the memo, but I wanted to highlight those key changes, kind of larger changes for you today. So where we are in terms of the overall schedule, we're really coming to the halfway point here with the development of the 2050 MTP, with the conclusion of the needs assessment on the near-term horizon and wrapping up the prioritization process as well. And that methodology, both of those are anticipated to be completed in early 2025. That really signals the start of our infrastructure investment scenario planning tasks. So that's where we're looking at what the future is going to hold and taking all the information that we've gathered, all the work that's been done, and starting to bring the last part of that discussion in, the financial aspect. So a little bit of a preview for next year. As part of this task, we're going to be evaluating our different funding policies and seeing what those resulting impacts are to project cost feasibility based on the needs list that will be finalizing very soon, and the prioritization methodology that will be finalized within the next few months as well. So what you're seeing here in the pie chart on the screen is the 2045 Metropolitan Transportation Plans funding policy and where MetroPlan Orlando TMA funds have been allocated amongst these 4 different modal programs and the percentages that equates to. As we look to our 2050 plan, we'll be asking questions about whether this is the right funding allocation and distribution. Should we change some of these numbers, add a new slice to the pie, remove a slice? We'll be looking at all of these different scenarios to make sure that what we're ultimately building to is a funding policy that helps us achieve our goals, objectives, and measures that we've developed collaboratively this year. Make sure that we're achieving our performance metrics for the next 25 years, but also allowing us to address and work with the future trends and drivers of change that will influence how we achieve that shared vision for 2050. So there will be a lot more to come on this topic, and I'll have a little more information about this at the technical workshop next week as well, to give you a more detailed preview. But for today, that concludes my updates on the 2050 plan. Does anyone have any questions?
Any questions for Taylor?
Yes.
Murdo?
Where does the transit come into place into this metro plan? Because I think that that is a critical component when we are talking about mobility and the connectivity and the multimodals. And are they able to get some funding? And if they are, what type of programs are they going to be implementing?
So we've completed the transit vision plan as part of the 2050 MTP. So that vision for 2050, what transit could look like, has already been completed. We're working on getting that published to our website right now. But in terms of funding policy, that's a question we're going to be exploring through our infrastructure investment scenario planning work. In terms of the 2045 plan, so current funding policy, that was 30% of Metro Plan Orlando funding being allocated to transit.
Okay, very good. And if I do have a second question, and this is regarding technology and also safety and the safe routes to schools. Or schools, I know that with the new technology and the city of Orlando, and I think that also Osceola County and Orange County, we are looking into the automated speed enforcement cameras as the school zones, and we're looking at the models and how we're going to be approaching this. It seems that the programs, based on what we are contemplating, it can pay for itself. So my question is, how do we implement this technology and safety that is coming up from different resources from the legislature, that we can also adopt this and perhaps to facilitate some of these programs as well?
So we don't have an answer to that for our 2050 plan yet, because I don't want to presuppose any of the committee members' opinions on this. But one scenario that I'm very hopeful that we will discuss as part of the 2050 plan is potentially adding a slice to this pie specifically for safety funding, to create dedicated funding for safety projects within our region. What that percentage may be is still up for question as well. The presence of that dedicated funding source is also up for discussion. But all of the Vision Zero projects that have been identified as part of each of our regional, county, local, city, and town plans that have been developed and adopted over this calendar year, all of those projects that are eligible for Metro Plan Orlando funds are included in the new Safety Vision Zero projects category, so that modal program. So we're trying to organize the projects in a way that allows us to evaluate all of the potential funding scenarios that we may consider.
Thank you, Taylor.
Any other questions for Taylor? All right, I don't have a question. I just wanted to, again, thank you and your staff for the collaboration. It's I know it's been a lot of work on your end, and it's been a lot of work on our end too, but we definitely appreciate the collaboration and the chance to have a meaningful impact on this upcoming MTP. So definitely appreciate that.
And thank you. I thank you all as well. This is something we do once every 5 years, so it's not going to be something we do next calendar year either. Only one set of homework this time. Thank you.
Well, thank you. All right, and next we will have Will Hawthorne with CFX with a presentation on the State Road 417 connection to the Orlando Sanford International Airport.
Mr. Chairman, committee members, good morning. A lot of familiar faces out there, so it's good to see you again. Metro Plan, thank you for allowing us to come in and provide an update on all the planning studies we have going on. We'll wrap up with an emphasis on the 417 Sanford International Airport connector. So right now we have 5 PD&E studies ongoing, 3 on our existing system and 2 on our existing system, 3 that are new alignments, 2 in Osceola County and 1 in Seminole County. The first 2 on our existing system are 417 and 429. Once the new alignments, once we get there, it's the Southport Connector Expressway, which I'm sure many of you have heard about, the Northeast Connector Expressway, and then the, again, Sanford Airport Connector. Starting off with the 417 Capacity Improvements Project. This is about a 7-mile segment of 417 stretching from 528 on the south end north to 408 on the north end. This segment is currently 3 lanes in each direction. We're looking at adding 1 more lane in each direction, as well as the flex lanes. So I'm sure many of you have seen the flex lanes on 417 that have opened up down near I-Drive and on 429. So that system currently ends at 528. This PD&E study will look at adding additional capacity as well as flex lane capacity up to 408. We kicked off the study in May of this year. Again, the only right-of-way impacts we look at having are possibly in the stormwater treatment areas. We are kind of sharpening our pencil a little bit to see if there's any kind of modifications that can be done to avoid having right-of-way impacts. So that's something we'll hope to have ironed out in the next 3 weeks or so. I guess the next public involvement for this will be the public meeting in February. Will be held somewhere in the corridor area. I think we're still trying to get that ironed out, but we will have the project wrapped up in May of 2025. On the west side of town, almost a mirror image of the 417 project, except that this is a 2-lane segment or 2 lanes in each direction. Again, we're looking at adding an inside lane in both directions, as well as extending the flex lanes from where they end today at Tilden Road down to Sidell, where we tie in with the Turnpike Enterprise on their segment of 429. This is a 7-mile segment. It does kind of traverse where 516 ties in. So there's a lot of coordination happening there. Again, from a right-of-way perspective, we really only anticipated some right-of-way takes being in the stormwater area, but we're pretty confident that with some modifications to those areas, we can avoid that. So we're trying to dot our I's and cross our T's to see if that can truly be done. Again, we'll have this one wrapped up in May of 2025. And we'll have a public meeting in February, I think at the Orange County National. So if anyone's interested in coming out, please let me know and we can get you that information. All right, on to our new alignments. I put this slide up and kind of zoomed out a little bit so that you can see what the vision is for North Osceola County. And I know the chairman and Christina are very familiar with this. They actually sit in on our calls for Southport and Northeast Connector. But when you zoom out and you start to see with the 534 extension that we have in design, the 538 Point Santa Parkway extensions that we have in design that my colleague David is working on, and then DOT's I-4 Point Santa Connector, you see the Beltway vision and the relief that we're trying to get accomplished for the Osceola residents so that they have some degree of travel reliability in their neighborhood. So we'll start off with the 538 Southport Connector Expressway. This is a 15-mile corridor that starts at Coa Street on the west side or the left side of the slide. It dips down to the south, gets into the Cypress Parkway existing corridor where there's 2 lanes in each direction there. The alternative we're looking at is co-located. So it would be a 6-lane expressway with some improvements on Cypress Parkway. I'll speak to that in just a moment. Co-located out to Pleasant Hill Road. The alignment would cross Reedy Creek and some existing right-of-way that exists there today. Peels up to the north a little bit, and then the study area expands out quite a bit to allow for us to look at 3 different alternatives. The main purpose of that is to make sure that it's consistent with the Osceola County adopted South Lake Tahoe Master Plan. So again, we're still working through this project. We did over the summer have an opportunity to revisit our traffic projections. And that netted some pretty positive benefits from the public's perspective. I'd say the biggest benefit to that was the widening of Cypress Parkway. So today it's only 2 lanes in each direction. With our project, by the time this is built, that roadway, the local roadway, would need to be 3 lanes in each direction. So we have included that as part of this PD&E, in addition to our regional improvement. That would be the expressway, we'll call it upstairs. So it's kind of like the Maitland, except it's not on, we've got a couple different options, but expressway would be above, the local improvements would be down below. So that has been very popular with the public since we have made that change. We did recently hold a informal public meeting to kind of refresh with the public everything that's happened with it, the updates. And the general sentiment that I got was, when can you build it? It changed from, this is a bad idea, to we need it now, when can you build it? So it's we're making headway, and we're just trying to get there. Hopefully we'll have our public meeting, our alternative public meeting, first quarter of 2025. We'll have all the alternatives fully baked. We'll have the cost estimates done, right-of-way impacts, so that the public can weigh in on that in a matrix format. And the goal, the commitment really is to get our public hearing done in Q4 of 2025, and then our board presentation and decision in December of 2025 for this project. Continuing east, we have the State Route 515 Northeast Connector Express Phase 2 Expressway. This corridor, due to the size, has a much more extended schedule. And to put this area in perspective, it's bigger than the size of the city of Kissimmee and St. Cloud combined. So that's quite a few parcels and acres to get some data collection on. We're early on in the process of this one. We recently completed our tier 2 or tier 1 analysis, where we started the project with 7 different alignments. If you look at the left side, those are the alignments we have right now. We started with 7. We've since eliminated 3, and have carrying the remaining 4 into our tier 2 analysis, which is ongoing. Now, if you switch over and look to the right side, these are all of the developments in the area that are at some stage of approval. And as well as that, you've got the large landowners. So you can see the window for providing some sort of multimodal corridor in this area is rapidly closing. The right-of-way contemplated for this connection is 330 feet wide. It is a multimodal corridor. So we'll have our expressway lanes, and then some envelope, if you will, set aside for whatever multimodal corridor makes sense at that time. The corridor lengths, depending on which one you take, are anywhere from 20 to 23 miles long. And then from a schedule perspective, we've had our first round of advisory committee meetings. We've got our EAG, PAG, a community engagement group meeting, actually. ESC, which are our environmental stewardship committee. We're covered on the advisory group meetings on this one, on all our projects. And our next big one will be the public kickoff in Q2 of 25. Everything goes well, we'll hopefully have this one wrapped up in Q4 of 2026. Okay, our last alignment to cover today is in Seminole County. This is the Sanford Airport Connector. Study area is shown here in orange. With me today is David Dangle. He's our consultant project manager. We'll take a little bit more of a deeper dive into this one. He can help with any questions that come up as a result. So as some of you may recall, we recently wrapped up, David actually just wrapped up the concept feasibility and mobility study in 2023, just last year. We quickly took the next step, moving it into the next step of a project life cycle, which is PD&E phase. And that's where we're at today. It's a much smaller study area, so we were able to set a 12-month schedule. We're probably 60% of the way through. We started in May of this year and are working towards our next set of advisory group meetings in January. Right after that, we'll have our alternatives public meeting at the end of January, and then we'll have our public hearing in April of 2025. So we do have 5 alignments under consideration. The alignment 1 is the easternmost that kind of goes out and around some of the existing developments. Alignments 2, 3A, and 3D are the most direct routes. And then alignment 4 was added at the tail end of the concept feasibility and mobility study by our ESC, which is a viaduct option kind of co-located with Lake Mary Boulevard. So basically, this corridor, because it does have a relatively short termini from starting at 417 and ending at Red Cleveland or somewhere on Lake Mary Boulevard, the primary purpose is to relieve Lake Mary Boulevard and to simplify access to the airport. Because of that, we do have a reduced typical section. This would only be 1 lane in each direction at this point. So it's not the 330 feet. So that kind of helps the project viability a little bit. And one of the primary updates we have are the traffic numbers, the traffic projections, which you see here. As with any PD&E, no build is one of the options. So the projected traffic on Lake Mary Boulevard is about 36,000 cars, AADT. And then we start to build in which alternative and how that would affect Lake Mary Boulevard from a relief standpoint. Starting with option 1, that comes in second place with about a 43% reduction in traffic on Lake Mary Boulevard. Options 2, 3A, and 3D. They're very similar in length. They're very close to each other, so they all have the same traffic generation. Those are the most beneficial to Lake Mary Boulevard. And then the viaduct alternative only comes in at 21%. And I did get with the team and kind of inquire what was driving that. And they said for a couple of reasons. The biggest, it's a little bit more of a circuitous route. And it's also a bit of a backwards movement. So you're going northwest to come back east, and then and vice versa, you're going west to come back southeast. So it's just not something that has a big draw from a traveler perspective. So those are where we're at with our latest planning studies. That concludes my presentation, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Laura?
Hello, thank you for that presentation. I'm curious, I think for the first 417 project that you showed near the Orlando airport area, if the study looked at the Sunshine Corridor expansion and the relationship of any potential mode shift with that parallel transit route.
I'll need to get with the team on that. We'd have to look at it not only for that segment, for I guess all the way down 417 and or into 528 to get some sort of access to the airport north or from the south end. But I'm sure we're looking at it to some extent, but I'll get with the team and make sure that it's something that they're at least analyzing.
Yeah, I would anticipate that it would relieve some of the demand from the 417 since it is such a parallel route for that. And then on your last one, I'd be curious to see how your recent projects with traffic projections lined up with actual traffic projections over the past, because what we've been finding is some of the things in our older planning documents is that we were grossly overestimating the traffic growth. So it'd be interesting to see that 36,000, how your previous traffic projections lined up with actual.
The best way I can address that question is 429, the widening projects that we're wrapping up now. We started that project in 2000, I think. The design year is 20 years, and we got right at 20 years. I want to say that we've been hitting the target pretty well on those. I do know in this study area, just in this dash line, there's over 800 homes being permitted right now. I'm sure some of you can speak to that, but it's housing's limited, and every piece of property that's possible is turning into that. So you got to balance the transportation. We got to provide relief somewhere. So I mean, I'm not aware of anything that we're not hitting. I think we're getting pretty close. There are some ebbs and flows. I know that on 429 and 417, we got a few more years than 20 years on. But I know that with the recession, they kind of flatlined a little bit, and then after that, it doubled in 5 years. So it made up for that recession area very quickly. But yeah, I mean, I'm sure it's something that they're gonna take another look at, and these are preliminary, but they do get refined as we move forward in the project. You're welcome.
I think Shad and then Brian.
Yeah, my question was on the one project you didn't cover, which was the 414 expansion. I kind of just wondered a summary of where that is and how that's going, maybe timeline.
That is actually in design.
It is.
So we are
Okay.
past the planning phase. We are, I think David can probably speak to it a little bit better, but I think we're trying to bid that at the end of 2025.
Awesome.
So they are working diligently. A lot of geotech challenges for that project, as some of
Yeah.
you may know.
Yeah,
But
makes sense.
it is something that, coordination with DOT is ongoing, and, it's definitely a need. I get calls from friends almost weekly saying, when is this going to be done? And I said, these things take a little bit of time. The project's an MOT project, really, because you gotta
Yes.
keep the patient alive while you're, building a new project. So,
Yeah.
but it is underway.
Thank you.
Brian.
Speaking of keeping the patient alive, your Southport project that you talked about, the piece that is Cypress Parkway, didn't seem like you had a lot of options there. So you're working within the local roadway. Is that correct?
That's
So
correct.
that's a county roadway.
Correct.
And you had mentioned that there was a 6-lane demand, but then you talked about a Maitland style improvement. Is it 6 lanes and the Maitland, or?
It's 6 lanes expressway and 6 lanes Cypress Parkway.
Okay, so you're building that for the county then? Is that
Yeah,
right? Or
so-
is there a funding relationship that the county's kicking in funding as well?
The early discussions have been a right-of-way exchange. We build some improvements in exchange for for us being in the county right-of-way. We're not only going in Osceola, we're going in Polk's right-of-way as well. So that's why we've had them engaged from the very beginning. And, it's Christina and Josh has been there, and Nick, I don't think he's here, but yeah, there is a right-of-way exchange that will have to happen, and they will get, if this thing moves forward, they will get 6 lanes of Cypress Parkway.
Okay, very good. Just trying to figure out that dynamic there.
Yeah, we are looking at a MSC wall section, fully bridge section through Cypress Parkway, and then a hybrid option of that, based on some of the public feedback we got. So
Okay, it's a big change for a 2-lane roadway, right?
well, it's 4 lanes, or 2 lanes in each
I mean,
direction.
2 lanes in each.
Yeah, it is a big change, but I mean, for Point Santa, it's all about options. They've got 2 options to get out, to go north. And those, I mean, Pleasant Hill is any kind of rush hour. It's red from Point Santa Boulevard all the way to John Young Parkway. We plan our meetings down there outside of rush hour, just so that we can get in and, be as efficient as we can with our time.
Okay, good. Thanks for that clarification.
Thank you.
Any other? Return?
Yeah, back on the alternative 4 for the connection to the airport.
Mhm.
What is the western termini? It's actually between the two, 427 and Lake Mary Boulevard, or
Which option are you, the western termini?
alternative 4, the western.
Oh, it would be a 3rd level interchange with 417. So these are connections to and from the south. Because there's an existing interchange there today, this would have to be a 3rd level.
Okay.
So
Thanks.
Any other questions? All right, thank you, Will. Appreciate the
Thank you.
presentation. Great update. And Next, we have Vince Dyer with Bike Walk Central Florida to present the Best Foot Forward annual report.
All right, thanks for having me here today, guys. It's a pleasure to speak in front of you about our Best Foot Forward program. So I'm standing in today for Emily Bush, our executive director. I'm the manager of the Best Foot Forward program. So my expertise here will be about this program. At the end, there'll be a couple slides about Bike Walk, which I'll have a little less limited knowledge on, but I'll let you know who you can contact about that once we get there. So we just wrapped up our most recent fiscal year. I don't need to read these stats to you, but I'll kind of highlight a few things. So the 25,000 plus stage crossings, that's each individual time one of our data collectors crossed the road to take data. Right, so imagine how many steps they got in crossing the road each time, because they're going out to the 78 crosswalks and collecting data 6 times throughout the year at each crosswalk. So we can get a good representative sample. We never want to make decisions based off of 1 or 2 data collections. We want to get kind of a good amount of trial studies kind of going through to give us a good average. For enforcement, engineering, education, enforcement, we had a lot of buy-in from our partners. A gaudy amount of warnings and citations last year, over 800 in total, which is great effort. We provide them a sheet, English on the front, Spanish on the back, that goes over the law. We also use that same sheet at our outreach events for education. And immediately when we hand that out to the public, the first thing they see is right across big bar. It says $164 minimum fine and 3 points on your license. Usually gets quite the reaction. For engineering, there were 14 different engineering improvements. Some of those were in combination with enforcement. Some of them were engineering alone. But on average, between all of those, there was a 25% increase in driver yield rate for each one of those on average. And we were able to provide 136 recommendations for engineering at the end of the year, focusing on low-cost recommendations. We want to stay in our lane. So I know that we could go out and recommend flashing beacons and signals everywhere, but we're focused on what the infrastructure looks like without those things. If there was a storm that hits and those go out, what's the existing infrastructure that's there and is it safe? And then for education, again, we'll talk about each of these, but we reached over 7,000 people. Our resources distributed also over 7,000. Those are things where we're going out in the community, we're like individually talking to people, having conversations, providing them with resources. And we did 78 of those events and presentations last year. So those 78 crosswalks are spread across all 3 counties, Seminole, Osceola, and Orange County. Our 8 city partners included Longwood and Castleberry and Seminole, Kissimmee and St. Cloud down in Osceola. And then here in Orange County, we had Orlando, Apopka, Winter Park, and Oakland. 16 of our crosswalks that we monitored improved from enforcement alone. So no engineering improvements, nothing special other than the enforcements themselves. On average, those improved 12%. 9 of our crosswalks improved from engineering alone. That's a 26% increase. And then 5 of those improved from both. That one you would think would be higher. It's actually a little lower just because of the circumstances. A lot of those engineering alones were things like flashing beacons or in-street signs where there wasn't necessarily enforcement that followed. So that's why those ended up being higher in the end on average. But yeah, a lot of those ones that had both had some low cost improvements mixed with enforcement. So you can see kind of the distribution of crosswalks throughout the area. So Apopka, this one, the stats don't jump off the page necessarily. I wanted to start with one because it's just a nice modest improvement showing what can happen. They did a single enforcement, 15 warnings and citations, and it improved 6% from year to year. Again, that's an average of 6 data collections per year. So we're seeing a consistent 6% improvement just from the one enforcement before and after over Jason Dwelly, next to Jason Dwelly Park. In Seminole County, they've been enforcing this one for a couple of years, 34 warnings and citations, and improved 14%. It's right next to a middle school, which makes it even more important. We have some thresholds. This one's approaching one of them. We have low yielding crosswalks, which is anything below 33%. This is one of those. Moderate yielding is 33% to 66. So this is just about to approach that moderate yielding. And then anything 66% and above is considered high yielding based on what we see in our data. So this is one that we want to keep going with to move it as many as we can from that low category to medium and then moderate to high. Over in Orange County, this is one of our more dangerous crosswalks. only 10% of drivers yielding at this one. It's 5 lanes across, pretty fast speeds going through here. They did 78 warnings and citations, having field days out there. Enforcement alone up to 20% now, so moving in the right direction. And in Kissimmee, this one I'm particularly proud of, being a Kissimmee resident. They've been enforcing this one for 2 years. They enforce it almost every time, 172 warnings and citations over 2 years. That shows a 15% increase. You see this one's also approaching that moderate yielding. I apologize about the pictures. That's actually, the pictures are showing Thacker and Kissimmee Trail. This is actually at the Emery Canal Trail. So both trail crossings, which again, those trail crossings, the school crossings, we like to prioritize. For engineering, over in Oakland, and again, there's many partners here today that I could mention. These aren't all of the crosswalks that improved, so I'm taking a representative sample here. I could talk for hours, but for your sake, I will limit it. They put in a 5-second leading pedestrian interval, essentially just changing the signal timing, giving pedestrians, when they press the button, 5-second head start. That had a huge improvement, 45% of drivers yielding before, 80% after, just from a simple change in the signal timing. Okay, so we are very excited about putting in more of those at signalized intersections, especially in conjunction with some of these plans from the Vision Zero project, our high injury network. I know Osceola County chose a number of signalized intersections this year, whereas the past we've been mostly focused on those kind of uncontrolled approaches. So we're excited to do more of this work with the signal timings and things like that. In Orange County, they put a mid-block pedestrian signal over on Oak Ridge Road. This already had a flashing beacon, keep in mind. It had the RRFB. You can see in the first picture there, they had it on the sides, but not in that center median. Only 63% drivers yielding, which is a little low for a flashing beacon. They went all out, pedestrian mid-block. It's up to 80% now, consistently a 17% increase. And in Longwood, vertical in-street sign right in front of Longwood Elementary, went from only 33% of drivers yielding now to 78%. Some of our high marks for that for individual data collections were as high as 90% of drivers yielding, which is more effective than a stop sign. Yeah, pretty cool. At St. Cloud, at Budinger and Peghorn Way, they put in a flashing beacon here next to Peghorn Nature Park. It was 33% before, now it's at 81%. So that's a 48% increase. Really excited about what we saw over there in St. Cloud. And then when you combine enforcement and engineering, we had a few examples. Castleberry also put an in-street sign with some consistent enforcement over at North Winter Park and Bridle Path. This is a little deceiving. It shows before 26, after 57. That after is actually going to be higher than that. 57 is our annual average. We only had 2 data collections out of the 6 that were afterwards. So what we saw afterwards of those 2 data collections were more than 70% of drivers yielding. But again, we don't like to make any major determinations based off 1 or 2 data collections. So we'll be following up on that as we get more data, but a 31% increase. In St. Cloud, 17th and Delaware, again, some simple solutions make sense too. They put in an additional yellow sign that had one side, not the other, along with consistent enforcement, raised from 42 to 55. So again, starting to creep up toward that 66% high yielding rate. And that's not doing anything crazy like flashing beacons or in-street signs, just good old-fashioned enforcement and basic signage. Over in Seminole, this is one we've been working on for a while. They did so many improvements over here, which it's a lot to name. The big one was the stop here for PEDS sign, that in terms of how it affected the yield rate. They also flattened out the median. They removed a couple of trees right next to the crosswalk sidewalk there in the middle to improve visibility. In the next 6 months, they're also planning on adding flashing beacons, but just with these stop here for PED signs, it jumped up 30%, which is one of the better improvements from that type of sign. And then moving on to education, not getting too deep into it, just kind of showing a little bit kind of throughout the different counties. One thing that's new is our sign waving campaign. So back in September, right at the end of our fiscal year, throughout the year, we've been working on how do we get more education at the crosswalks themselves. So we'll go out to community events, right? But they're not necessarily next to the crosswalk. We'll do presentations, not necessarily next to the crosswalk, and pop-up events. But we want to get out of the crosswalks themselves and bring visibility. So we started these sign waving campaigns In the photo, hard to tell there, it says less than 20% of drivers stop for pedestrians at this crosswalk. So we're actually letting drivers know at the crosswalks themselves how dangerous they are, show them that's the law to stop for pedestrians and putting these signs up. These are ones that we're looking forward to tracking how it affects the data. A couple of them, early results are good. Delwood and Primrose in Orlando, we also had done a sign waving at the first data collection. Since then, we saw a 10% increase, but again, that's just one data collection. So we want to get more data before we try to claim success, but we're really encouraged by the response from our partners. They're really liking these types of sign wavings. And we see FDOT doing these types of events as well. Their red light campaigns, turning right on red. So we know that there's some consistency in how this is being done across the board. Before I get too deep into, I have just a couple more slides about bike walk stuff, but that's it for Best Foot Forward. I want to open up if there's any questions specifically about our pedestrian safety program.
Murdo?
Thank you very much. That we're improving the safety. My question is regarding the educational aspect. Yeah, as we are trying to engage on campaigns with the Bike Walk Central Florida, and also to reach out to our communities, what do you think that it is a strategic approach just to make sense? I know that we are trying to approach the schools because that's where we have a lot of the young kids and people that they are using these facilities. But what about with the community? What we do find at least in Orange County, is that sometimes when we implement these traffic calming projects or that we go to the community, we just finished the Oak Ridge project.
Yep.
And so that one was on an underrepresented area. We went from 5 lanes to 4 lanes. We had the raised medians, a lot of the landscaping and all of these features that it really brought value to the community.
Yeah.
Also, we have the transit, one of the most used transit facilities, but there was a lot of pushback. Going back and forth because people are not used to the access management. It was different. It was not a straight left coming from the side streets. So what is the strategy that you recommend, or shall we have something they do have their Facebook pages or next neighbors and whatnot? So I know that we set up all of these communities with the tables and the vendors and we talk. Are there other ways perhaps that we can engage in what is recommended from your perspective?
Yeah, this is something that we constantly talk about internally with our staff of how we reach people better, how we reach more people, how we reach them more effectively, get the message across the right way, and especially targeting those people that maybe aren't as receptive to our message, the aggressive drivers, right? The speeding drivers, like how do we change their behavior? So it's a constant thing that we're trying to keep up with. What I will say is that we have had to shift strategies a bit. You mentioned that in the past, there's been a lot of focus on community events. And we know that some of those bigger events where lots of people attend, whereas we used to be able to go for free, they're now charging like $50 or more. Sometimes they give us a discount, tell us it's $25, but we're a nonprofit. We don't budget for paying for those things. So we've had to cut back on some of those really large table activities. So then we have to say, okay, what can we do outside of that that's going to be able to get a similar or potentially even a better effect? So the sign waving campaigns, again, it's really early on in that one. That's one where we feel like if we can do it right there at the crosswalk and the drivers see us there, we bring visibility to it. They think about it when they come back through and drive through again, same way that they do when there's an enforcement going on. They see media or police around. And what we want is for them to, when they drive back through again, think about that as it's going through. So not necessarily always about just talking with people out at an event where they're just trying to have fun, but reaching them where we're actually trying to get the effect itself. So that's going to be a work in progress. I don't necessarily have a direct answer for you right now, but one that we're constantly working on and looking forward to sharing some results once we get some results back from that. So thank you. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Gary?
I want to thank you and the organization. Your feedback that you give us, it's very helpful. I mean, we have the signs up there and we're used to it. You guys come in with a different perspective. You see what's happening in other communities. You give us some advice, and then we put those in and we see the numbers increase. So I appreciate it. We also, the data collectors that are out there putting their lives on the line. They see stuff that we don't see. They're there for the entire time, and I just appreciate it, and grateful for your organization.
Yeah, we appreciate you guys too. And I know that Osceola County immediately after giving them just some low cost recommendations, went and put in some extra yellow signs, fixed some of those truncated domes that, we're trying to get our, communities that are more visually impaired. So you guys were really great and instrumental in getting those quickly done. So I appreciate it. All right, let me finish just a couple slides here and then you guys can ask any other questions you want. Again, I'm a little less knowledgeable about this stuff, but I was at the Bike 5 event just recently in October. This is one of our ones that go across Orange and Seminole counties, trying to get people to connect in the urban landscape of getting to where they need to go. So great event that just recently happened. They've kicked off a Bike Walk Kids program where we're getting out into the community with kids at schools and other community events and presenting them about bike safety, doing helmet fittings, teaching them the rules of the road when they're on their bikes. We are going to participate in a number of helmet fitter trainings and helmet fitter events coming up, including the Roll and Stroll and Bike Rodeo and the Jordan Sporting Goods event that was mentioned earlier. And other stuff happening. Again, I'm not as knowledgeable about these, but our Healthy West Orange Trails Connection does have the trail grant program and trail enhancement expansion that they're working on. Pine Hills Trail Safety Audit, going out and making recommendations to how to improve that, as well as webinars and grant application assistance. I'll let you know who you can contact about that if you're interested. And then in active transportation, Seminole County is also doing some signature trail maps as well. That's already started being developed and in works. Oakland's doing a sidewalk study as well and how it connects to the trails, making sure that those are safe as well. So if you want to know more about any of those kind of trails connections or active transportation, you'll want to contact Emily Bush or Patrick Panza. They are the ones that specialize in that. Otherwise, anything else that is related to pedestrian safety, myself and our coordinators are more than happy to help with that. So any other comments or questions, I'm happy to answer or address.
Are there any other, Miles?
Thank you. So one of the things you mentioned was just cost effectiveness. So I'm curious, do you all track by intersection the amount in theory spent on an enforcement event or the engineering that took place and then the change you've seen, kind of like the ROI for those respective?
Yeah, that's not something that we currently track. I will say that right now we are in the process of building out our GIS database. We're taking what was a paper system where our data collectors were writing on paper and then scanning them on a computer and then we type them in, to now doing it on an app itself and going directly into the system. Now that we have the ability to do that, we're planning on taking our outreach, putting those as pinpoints on the map as well, and trying to figure out what else we can incorporate in. That's one that we hadn't actually considered, is like the return on investment for like the amount of money. So thank you for saying that, because I'm immediately going to bring that back to Patrick and Emily as something that we could incorporate into our map. So thank you for that.
Sure. I have another one.
Yeah.
So outside of the specified enforcement events that you hold, do you get any information from the respective policing entities on citations they issue throughout the rest of the year at those specific intersections?
Yeah, more just anecdotal stories. So whenever we go to the enforcements, a lot of times the officers there will say like, oh yeah, since we did this enforcement and I've been thinking it's like top of mind now. I saw this happen the other day, pulled them over, this whole hat. So and that's kind of the goal of what we wanted, is for them. I don't know how big of a focus it was before they started doing these operations, but doing them every quarter, keeping it top of mind, knowing what statute exactly to reference. And we let them keep those extra handouts just in case, they do see a driver going through an intersection with a pedestrian. So anecdotally, we do hear that individually they'll see this happening, driver going through, they'll pull drivers over. So we're glad that that is happening. In terms of numbers of warnings and citations, we are not currently tracking that outside of the operation.
Okay.
Yeah.
It just, I think human nature,
Mhm.
I see an enforcement event, it's a one-time inconvenience for me as I'm driving down the road and
Yeah.
I'm gonna go back to usual behaviors perhaps
Mhm.
when it's not, good to hear that some people, we see some changes
Yeah.
from a portion of the population, but being able to tie that maybe to another number instead of just the anecdotal, that's good. But then you can say, okay, are you friends that are policing this area kind of keeping up
Right.
with this yourself?
Yeah, good point. Great question.
Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you, Vince. I appreciate the
Thanks so much for your
presentation.
time, guys.
Update. And next we'll have Eric Hill from Metro Plan Orlando with an update on the EV readiness study.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Happy holidays. This is going to provide you with an update on our EV readiness study. I'm going to review my previous presentation to you real quickly and then talk about the workshops that we convened since that time. So previously, I introduced electric vehicles to everyone, talked about planning context, federal, state, and local, as well as in the regional setting, talking about level 2 charging versus fast charging, and then infrastructure that is already in place around the region, ownership rates, and some discussion on EV policies. And then I mentioned some of the forecasts that we want to look at. So the workshops, I mentioned this one in my previous presentation. We had this utilities workshop. And in that conversation we had with the utilities, they expressed the need for consistent permitting across county lines within the region. There's a lack of qualified technicians for not only putting these charging facilities in, but maintaining them. They would like to have some control over the networks so that they can monitor how electricity is being provided. And they also wanted us, Metro Plan Orlando, to go after some federal funding. At the time, we did not believe we were ready to complete an application, because when you do one, you want to know what you want to ask for. And at that point, we really didn't know what we wanted to ask for. On October the 1st, we had our first policy workshop. We wanted to talk about goals and objectives that some of the jurisdictions have. We introduced some example policy and guidance that we've reviewed from around the country. And let me pause for a moment here and introduce Stephanie Sheely, who's with Kittleson's and Associates. They're the project manager for us. But what we discussed and found is that many of the jurisdictions already have some requirements and codes in their comprehensive plans. Some of the challenges that we talked about, and this parking for extended periods, it's the one that if anyone is a parent and you've had children in daycare, when you leave your child there longer than they need to be, you get penalized. And so how do we put something like that into place? We reviewed some examples from around the country, but maintenance and operations is another challenge. The literature is fraught with people going to charge their vehicles and they're not working or they're broken. So how do you maintain that? And then the trade-off between level 2 and then fast charging. There's a cost, substantial cost between those two charging levels. And how do you decide which one you want to put in and which one you want to maintain? We did have some discussion on this statute. This statute pretty much usurps some of the local control on how charging facilities can be put in place. I see it as something good because it creates consistency. On the bad side, it kind of takes away a little bit of control that you have as jurisdictions for enforcement or requirements for charging for developers. It's still in rulemaking, so there's still an opportunity to change some of that and lessen some of the control that the state wants to have. Charging site workshop was an in-person workshop that we had. We wanted to look at existing gaps because one of the challenges that we see, and as well as an opportunity, is that marginalized communities and multifamily housing units do not have access to charging facilities. If you have a home, and you have a solar panels on your home, then you can charge right there. But there's a challenge for marginalized communities as well as multi-housing units to have that access. So we wanted to talk about that. And again, Kittleson identified some national guidance here, and they created a site selection tool. If you identify a site, here's an opportunity for you to evaluate that site for its potential use. Again, looking at the gaps, those on the left side, you see those circles. Those are buffers, half a mile buffers around charging facilities. On the right, you see multifamily housing units. And you see the distance there or the lack of access to charging. So how do we, as a community, close that gap. Some of the national guidance, Kittleson identified some themes that go into locating charging facilities. Again, equity and accessibility, multifamily housing, procurement, and installation. Again, how do you go about, do you want to be the actual operator from a jurisdiction perspective? Do you want to be a leasee to a charging company? Or do you want to just provide a place for someone to come in and develop a charging facility? Community hubs are a possibility, partnerships and collaboration. This is discussed a lot when you go looking at federal funding. Some of the examples that I reviewed, you have a charging facility or charging company that wants to partner with you, and they're willing to put up a lot of the local match that is required. And some of this is done because they are loss leaders. The one example I'm familiar with is in Atlanta, where that company came in and wanted to provide that local match with the understanding that they're putting in level 2 charging at a convenience store and that it's not going to have a return on investment right away from the charging perspective. But they're going to be providing some advertisement while you're sitting there waiting for your vehicle to charge. And that's already being done now. I always fuel up at a local Wawa, and while I'm there fueling up, right there on the screen, they're telling me go inside and get a sandwich. So that kind of approach is being used. Again, technical assistance and resources on making sure that the facilities are working. I mentioned the charging site tool. Again, it continues on those themes. And this is something that can be provided to you for your use if you identify a location. And this is just an example on how it can be applied. This is the OUC location that's just north of us, and how it meets some of the themes. I mean, it clearly has electricity, has charging, it's located near transit, so it's multimodal, has connectivity, and it's downtown, so it's around a large population. Some of the feedback we received is, again, more data. One of the participants in the workshop is a Tesla enthusiast, and he has access to the locations for Tesla charging on an app. How do we get that information to include in the tool? Data sharing and partnerships, certainly talked about that a little bit. Anticipated land use. Jurisdictions, as you're looking at how your land use maps look, are you having some companies come in and want to use some of the land that you have available? And then the whole idea of improving the tool that Kittleson has developed and providing it to you for use. Grant applications and funding opportunities. The good news is that there's been a whole lot of funding available for bringing in charging facilities with the hope that electric vehicles will become more and more of the fleet that is currently existing. Bad news is that some of this funding is going away. This is one of the concerns that was discussed. I mentioned that, well, one of these that's listed here, charging and fueling infrastructure, is the one that the utilities encouraged us to partnership and go after. We do know that that one's not going to be available next year. And as we move forward, it's uncertain as if this funding and advocacy from the federal level will continue. And then lastly, these projects are just like roadway projects, capital projects. There's a capital expense, there's operational expense associated with it. In terms of financing models, as a jurisdiction, you can pay as you go, you can put it in your budget, you can do it through debt, or you can partner with private industry, which is mostly what I believe the federal government was looking for many of the jurisdictions to do. Deciding your role. If you want to be an operator, there's a host of requirements that you have to meet or would need to meet. If you're the landlord, certainly you can lease that a spot out to a private interest, or again, as an enabler, you can identify land use opportunities for a private interest to come in and operate a charging facility. Market demand analysis. This is usually when I've given this presentation now a few times. When I go around the room and I say, who has an electric vehicle? And nobody raises their hand like you're doing. And then I say, who's thinking about getting one in the next 5 to 10 years? Nobody raises their hand like you're doing. But automakers are starting to make these vehicles available to you. Certainly, if you are in the market, there's a vehicle for you. I remember the gentleman that I used to work with, he was a motorcycle enthusiast. And I was excited about getting a motorcycle. And he said, you know, there's a motorcycle for everyone and there's everyone for a motorcycle. I think that the industry is trying to create that for all of us. And then secondly, I had a conversation with a friend about this study I'm doing. And I expressed my concern that maybe the enthusiasm is waning for electric vehicles. And the response was, well, you know, the richest man in the world may come around and say, you get an electric vehicle, you get an electric vehicle. Everybody would have one. I think if he's given them away, I think we would all take them. This is just a projection from some data that Killison put together. Please do not bank on this. It's just used as speculation. And that mustard colored shading there, it looks mustard to me, is where we are in the region in terms of looking at the future demand for electric vehicles. And how does that translate into numbers? You see the percentage across the top, again, talking about if you're looking for an electric vehicle in the next 10 years. But the one that I like to highlight is the bottom row. That's where we're talking about that marginalized community where there is a need for charging. If we want to encourage people to transition to electric vehicles and they live somewhere where they do not own the actual property, they don't have a charging for themselves, how do they get to that charging spot and how do we make it available? We wanted to include a survey in this work, but Metro Plan Orlando was already doing a survey. And one of the questions that we asked them to include was this one on, you know, purchasing an electric vehicle, certainly in the next 20 years, same time frame as our long range plan. You see the return. Now, as a young transportation planner, I can remember having to ride a bus and do surveys and go into communities and ask, if we provided you transit service, would you use the transit service? Oh yeah, enthusiastically. Yes, I'd use it. But when you provide it, they don't show up. And so while this is encouraging, you know, who knows how things will change, or if many of us in the next 10 years will be driving electric vehicles. We are wrapping this up, finalizing a couple items here, our public outreach plan and website materials. We want to create a planning and monitoring strategy to watch this so that this just doesn't sit and we can continue to monitor this. And again, we're going to wrap this up next month. So, Mr. Chairman, that concludes my presentation. And if there are any questions or comments, please welcome.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Eric?
Eric, it sounded like you had some insight on the charging and fueling infrastructure program for next year. Do you know any status for that program for those of us that submitted recently?
My understanding on that particular grant is that that's not going to be a wrap. That's my understanding. The workshop that we did, the facilitator did mention that. So those other programs, my understanding is that the funding is running out. And as we change the administration, that funding may not be around. The literature that I've been reviewing is that discretionary programs are going away.
Right.
And so these are discretionary programs.
Yeah, for next year. I was wondering about, I think some folks submitted applications in, I think it was end of August.
Oh, yeah.
So I was
Oh,
wondering,
those, yeah.
yeah,
Oh, yeah,
for
those.
the program, for those of us that submitted, are we
Yeah, yeah. my
likely
sense
not
is
to
that-
get any
yeah,
awards?
Yeah, my sense is that you will receive it.
Okay,
That's that, but don't bank on this. Now, this is
Okay.
just me and my tea leaves, the tea leaves that I've been reading.
yeah,
Is that you probably will receive an award. And I forgot to mention that there are some jurisdictions that do have applications in. I do know OUC submitted an application as well. So again, my sense is that probably will receive it, but
okay,
don't go back and tell
yeah.
me.
We won't bank on next year for sure.
Any other questions? Yes.
The one discussion point that came up at one of our last meetings for the EV readiness was some of the current limitations for local governments in terms of EV charging infrastructure and requirements. So I would just encourage everybody to keep an eye, see if there's anything that comes up with the next legislative session or as the rulemaking process continues for EV charging and seeing where we can advocate for local input.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, as I mentioned, I've given this presentation to a couple of the committees, and one of the conversations that we had was retrofitting existing development. Now, how do you address that? And that's a challenge. It clearly is a challenge. And also, since we are in the holiday season, and it's my gift to you, I wanted to also give kudos out to Orange County and show a video on what they have just done in terms of establishing an electric vehicle charging facility. We're gonna try this.
Charging for all types of EVs, ensuring that residents and visitors are able to charge up in no time. Located on the Convention Center campus, this hub provides high-speed charging in Orange County's bustling iDrive district.
In partnership with OUC, this mobility hub exemplifies our commitment to sustainability and supports the environmental initiatives outlined in the sustainability plans of the Orange County Convention Center and Orange County government.
We're proud, very proud to be here today commemorating our second electric vehicle charging hub. Almost a year ago, we opened our first EV charging hub on Robinson Street in downtown Orlando. And since the opening of that Robinson hub and the soft opening, many of you may not realize we soft opened this hub in September. Both sites have hosted 5,897 unique customers, and we have dispensed more than 1.7 million kilowatt hours of energy. That's the equivalent, if you will, of 5.5 million road miles, eliminating 647 metric tons of CO2 emissions. But we're not stopping there. Through grant opportunities, we have plans to construct charging hubs throughout Central Florida.
That concludes my presentation.
Thank you for that. And congratulations, Orange County. Any final questions? All right. Thank you, Eric. Moving on to public comments and action items. We'll now hear public comments on the action items as we ask that you provide your name and address for the record, and please hold your comments to 2 minutes or less. If any members of the public wish to comment and are joining us virtually, please use the raise hand function and you will be recognized, or dial *9 on your phone keypad. We'll send you a prompt and unmute your mic. Do we have anyone joining us virtually who would like to make a comment?
Mr. Chairman, we have no hands
hands
raised
raised.
online and received no comments from the room.
And are there any written comments that were submitted before the meeting?
We've not received any.
Okay. So moving on then to action items. Our first item is approval of the October 25th, 2024 TAC meeting minutes, which are on tab 1 of your agenda packets. I do have a motion to approve the minutes. All right, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second, O'Keefe.
All right, motion and a second, is there any discussion? All right, hearing none, this is a voice vote. All those in favor state by saying aye. Any opposed, like sign? All right, motion passes unanimously. Our next action item is an amendment to the Transportation Improvement Program. More information can be found on tab 2 of your agenda packet, and Jason Sartorio of Metro Plan Orlando will tell us more about that.
Morning, Chairman and committee members. This morning I have several tip amendments for you. Additional information on the amendments looking at tab 2 of your agendas. As noted by Slade during agenda review, we do have one change from what is provided in your agenda packets. At this time, Metro Plan Orlando staff is recommending pulling FM number 447104-1 from action today. This amendment item will be brought back following review of additional information to be provided by FDOT. With that said, we have 5 other action items for consideration today. One for a federal transit emission discretionary grant for links. 2 other federal resilience discretionary grants received individually by Orange County and Osceola County, which will focus on improving stormwater management. And in addition, we have 2 items related to I-4 Beyond the Ultimate South, Moving Florida Forward initiative. And the 2 projects will add an additional lane in each direction from east of US 27 to east of World Drive. As I mentioned earlier, you have some additional information on these amendments looking tab 2 of your packets. At this time, we are requesting approval of the items presented today, excluding FM number 447104-1, the resurfacing project on State Road 500 in Orange County, which will come back following additional review by Metro Plan Orlando staff. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Jason. Do I have a motion to recommend the tip amendments with the change as noted?
Shad Smith, I'll move to approve with a change of removing the FM 447104-1, tabling that as recommended. Thank you.
Second, Castellano.
All right, thank you. I have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, this is a voice vote. All those in favor state by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, like sign? All right, motion passes unanimously. Jason? And our next action item is the amendments to the 2045 Metropolitan Transportation Plan. Taylor Laurent from Metro Plan Orlando can tell us more about that.
Good morning again. So we talked earlier about the 2050 Metropolitan Transportation Plans. That's what we're doing for the future. But as of now, we still have the 2045 MTP, which was adopted back in 2020 that we need to maintain for planning consistency purposes until such time as we adopt the future one. So in the spirit of this living document, there are a few annual updates that we make this time every year. The first being our tip refresh. So every project listed within the Transportation Improvement Program, there's always some changes. Jason's up here with tip amendments routinely throughout the year. We take the entirety of the Transportation Improvement Program and make sure that every project listed in there is updated in the 2045 Metropolitan Transportation Plan. So those cost estimates are 1-to-1. So that's a big effort with 600 plus, however many that is. Jason can give you the better number of that one, to make sure that everything's consistent for planning purposes. With those changes, and that does include the amendments from the October, November, and the ones that Jason just presented today here for December. So with all of these changes, it is really just an administrative update with no impacts to existing project cost feasibility. Item 2 is very similar in that the Transportation Improvement Program also includes several locally funded projects for planning consistency. Those do not have any state or federal funds associated with those projects in the TIP, but again, they're included to make sure that those projects are considered for other planning purposes. Those projects are also listed in the 2045 MTP for planning consistency. So those were updated as well to make sure those cost estimates were in line with what was shown in the TIP and the latest information that we have. So with those updates, again, it's mostly administrative with no impacts to existing project cost feasibility. Then our third item are other minor revisions for planning consistency. So these are requests that we receive from our partners throughout the year, mostly for typographical items. But in this case, there were, again, administrative changes. On table 15, our transit list, there was a removal of one project because it was duplicated within the table itself. So cleaning up that inconsistency. On table 18 for Osceola County locally funded projects, we added developer funded projects. So they're not state, federal, or locally funded, but they do have developer agreements associated with them. So they're being included on the list for planning consistency purposes and listed as locally developer funded project or listed as developer funded projects in that way. There are also 4 projects on the Osceola County list that are currently under construction, but we're going to update those cost estimates to reflect the latest information about what those construction costs have been to date. And then there are 2 typographical edits that we'll be making for 2 of the trail projects. Again, just changing the project name, minor edits to make sure that it's up to date with the latest and greatest information. So those are, again, administrative in nature with no impacts to existing project cost feasibility. So unless there are any questions, we are asking for your recommendation of approval for the proposed revisions to the 2045 MTP as they've been presented today.
Thank you, Taylor. Do I have a motion to recommend the 2045 MTP amendments as presented?
Shad Smith, I move to approve.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right. Motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, this is a voice vote. All those in favor state by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, like sign? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you.
All right, and I'll introduce our last action item today, the election of TAC officers for 2025. So at our last TAC meeting, the committee voted to appoint a officer selection subcommittee. Traditionally, the positions of chair and vice chair rotate amongst the 3 counties as well as the cities and towns within and our intergovernmental partners to ensure even representation on TAC leadership. So our current chair and vice chair are representing Osceola and Orange respectively, which means that Seminole's turn at vice chair. Subcommittee met this morning, December 6, 2024, and a summary of that meeting will be attached in the minutes of today's TAC meeting. They have provided a slate of recommendations available to you all to vote on, but of course, additional nominations are welcome if you so choose. The subcommittee recommended that Hong Lim of Winter Park, who is the current vice chair, become the chair for 2025, and Lenny Barden of Altamont Springs be vice chair for 2025. And also, just as a side note, Hong is not here today, but I checked with him. He's not being voluntold in absentia. So with that, turn it over to you, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thanks, Slade. So with this, we'll have separate motions for the chair and the vice chair. With that, do we have any additional nominations for chair? All right. If there's no other nominations, do I have a motion to approve the nomination of Hong Young Lim as 2025 TAC chairman?
Laura Hardwick, motion to approve.
Motion. Do I have a second?
Shad Smith, second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? All right. Hearing none, this is a voice vote. All committee members online, please unmute your microphones. Those in this room, please just speak out. All those in favor state by saying aye. Aye. Are there any opposed? State like sign. All right. Motion passes unanimously, and congratulations to Mr. Lim. Then next, the subcommittee, as Slade had mentioned, has nominated Lenny Barden with Altamont Springs for vice chair. Are there any other nominations for TAC vice chair? All right, there's no other nominations. Do I have a motion to approve the nomination of Lenny Barden as TAC vice chair?
Chad Smith, I'll move to approve that nomination.
A motion, do I have a second? Second. All right, yeah, motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, this is a voice vote. All committee members online, again, please unmute your microphones, and those in the room just speak out. All those in favor, state by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, like sign? And the motion passes unanimously. So congratulations to Hong and Lenny for moving forward and becoming our new chairs for the upcoming year. Next, there are no TAC only presentations today. And for general information, there are several items under general information in tab 4 of your agenda packets. Please review these items when possible. And then for upcoming meetings of interest, our next TAC meeting will be held in person on Friday, January 24th, 2025. The next Metro Plan Orlando Board meeting will be held in person on Wednesday, December 11th. And a full list of upcoming meetings is in your agenda packet. And moving on then to members' comments and other business. At this time, do any committee members want to make any final comments? All right. I do just want to make a comment myself. I just want to thank Metro Plan staff, Slade especially, for helping me along and in this process of being chair. And I want to thank everyone in the committee as well, that accomplished a lot of great things over this past year. And it's been an honor to be the chair, and definitely look forward to continuing on with that committee. So, are there any other? Thank you, appreciate that. Any other comments or, all right, Alex?
I just wanted to say happy holidays and safe travels if you're going anywhere.
Thanks. And I was gonna add, you kind of beat me to the punch, but thank you, Josh, for serving as TAC chair over the last year. Really appreciate it. Made my job a bit easier. So thank you.
Thank you.
Super quick, just one announcement. I know Taylor gave a brief presentation today. Hope to see all of y'all dial in next week for our MTP technical workshop. So we'll get more into that, but wanted to put that reminder out there. Also, just some good news I wanted to share with everyone. Over the past couple weeks, Slade Downs as well as Jason Sartorio, who has recently left the room, both sat and passed for the AICP exam. Wanted to give them that due recognition. They're candidates. They still have to, fill out the paperwork and all the other stuff. So we're really proud of them, but wanted to recognize them today. So hopefully at our next meeting, they'll be fully credentialed and all of that. But 2 additional planners now, certified planners on the MPO team. So again, congratulations to Slade and Jason.
That's great news. Any further comments? All right. Seeing no further member comments, we'll move on to the public comment section. If any members of the public wish to comment and are joining us virtually, please use the raise hand function and you will be recognized, or dial *9 on your phone keypad. We'll send you a prompt to unmute your mic. After you're recognized, please state your name and address for the record and limit your comment to 2 minutes or less. Do we have anyone joining us virtually who would like to make a comment?
Mr. Chairman, we have a Miss Courtney Reynolds who would like to speak.
All right.
Hi, thank you so much. My name is Courtney Reynolds. I'm a resident of Seminole County, located at 599 Lake Eagle Lane in Stanford, Florida, 32773. I'm here today as a representative of the Florida Bicycle Association, where I serve as the president of the board of directors. And the purpose of this public comment is to invite each of you and the communities that you represent to join the Hands-Free Florida Coalition in support of a Hands-Free Florida legislation specifically for 2025. You can learn more about Hands-Free Florida at, of course, handsfreeflorida.org, and you can reach me directly at president at floridabicycle.org. Our mission at Florida Bicycle Association is to make Florida better for people who want to bicycle and for people who need to bicycle. Part of that mission means working to make our roadways safer for all travelers. And that's a tall bar, especially in Florida, where an average of 9 people die on our roadways every day. 6 of these deaths are attributed to distracted driving. And there's a lot of things that are included in distracted driving, but we think drivers who are using their phones are of particular concern. And in case you didn't know this, you are 4 times more likely to be involved in a crash just by having a phone in your hand. And the Florida Bicycle Association has joined the Naples Pathways Coalition and many others to call for Hands-Free Florida, an effort to make it illegal to hold your phone while driving through legislative action in 2025. I appreciate the time to make a public comment, and hopefully we'll be able to connect if anybody is interested in learning more. Thank you.
Thank you. And do we have any members of the public attending in person that wish to make a public comment?
No comments received, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. And are there any written comments that are submitted before the meeting?
No written comments, but Ms. Reynolds, if you are still online, please give us your email address so we can follow up on some of the initiatives that you were talking about in your comment. Would appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. I will.
We stand adjourned at 11:47. Thank you.